Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, January 18th, 2024. Time for another show. I've asked Alina Habba to come in here and try and help me run the thing, and as it turns out, she has no idea how to do it, so I guess I'm just going to have to handle it from here on in. So just sit back and relax and collect your checks, Alina. Everything should be just fine, I'm sure, for all your clients. Big day in court for the fascist guy yesterday. And a big performative day for him as usual, getting himself in trouble with the judge more or less on purpose and being quite demonstrative about it. But more interesting, I think, than his theatrics have been, and certainly more revealing, I'll have to fill you in on it, or maybe it'll be something we'll discuss. I don't know whether it'll be first hour stuff or what, but reports from the courtroom. I kind of wish we were able to give over large portions of the show to following this thing or watching it on TV and commenting along the way, except, of course, it's not on TV. But the reporters who were in the room have some astonishing revelations. You might not know this, but as it turns out, Trump does not have good lawyers, generally speaking. And so it was a big day yesterday, not only for his theatrics, but for Alina Habba apparently having difficulty with, like, courtroom procedure 101, like how to introduce items and documents into evidence. Not really ringing a bell with her for some reason. It's really interesting watching the reporters watch the judge teach her on the fly how to handle evidence. As a matter of fact, I guess, real quickly, I think I have handy a social media posting about that. A lot of the lawyers sharing these things. It's quite amazing. And Greg noting here, well, she's not a trial lawyer, but I mean, you kind of need to have one with you. And of course, he's got other lawyers. Why they're not handling this, I have no idea. But somebody who was following the action in the courtroom, having posted to social media here, Judge Kaplan saying, Ms. Habba, you can't use documents that are not in evidence. Okay, she's questioning E. Jean Carroll about certain documents, and they haven't been introduced into evidence. They haven't been identified as to what they are. They haven't been verified by the other, This has a procedure just, in many ways analogous to things that happen in Congress. We always are pointing out, well, you can't just say, this is the bill under consideration. Or you can't just say, hey, should we pass a law that says that's illegal? We might want to do things that way, but write down the bill, give me the words that you're thinking of, put it into the congressional record, give everybody a copy, ask for permission to bring it under consideration on the floor, get the agreement of the rest of the body to do so, tell me about how many hours you're going to debate it. Okay, good. All right, now begin. Right? You can't just show up with a document and say, read this. Okay, what is it? Who says? So, this bit of conversation here between the judge and Alina Habba, Kaplan saying, Ms. Habba, you can't use documents that are not in evidence. And Alina Habba responding then proceeding to question Jean Carroll about it. Did you receive tweets in the 5 hours before President Trump spoke? And Carroll says, I hadn't seen them. And then Habba begins asking about them and says, were you tagged in these posts? And the judge has to stop her and say, listen, you can't at this point get into the content of these documents if they haven't been introduced into evidence. And I guess at some point then she says, well, how do you suggest I proceed, Your Honor? Well, how about with introducing them as evidence? Show it to her. Ask her if she recognizes it. Basically stuff that you would have seen in any courtroom drama. Do you recognize this document? Yes, it's my, my uncle's last will and testament. And then they will take it, in the courtroom drama, they take it, walk it over to the other counsel's table, show it to them, ask if there's any objection. And if they agree that appears to be the document was purported to be, you then, Your Honor, I'd like to enter this into evidence. It's marked this way, that way, right? The People's Exhibit A, whatever, however you might have marked it. And then if there's no objection to entering into evidence, it's entered, and then you begin talking about it, right? Show it to her, ask her if she recognizes it. Here, do you recognize it? Yes. And then Judge Kaplan says, listen, it's not marked. It should be marked. Do it appropriately. Do it overnight. They need to be pre-marked. You can't just walk in here with a document and play act your way through it. It's quite interesting to watch people commenting on it. So, all right, lots of that going on. That's not, I am sure, doing him any real favors in the courtroom. This time there is a jury for this trial. They're watching this incompetence unfold. Of course, the bigger topic of discussion and possibly the bigger problem, Donald Trump will not stop molesting people, even at a trial about how he won't stop molesting people. So how do I mean? Well, in a different sense, of course, than his assault on Jean Carroll all those years ago. But now he sits at his table, his defendant's table, and mutters loudly about what he thinks about various witnesses, including, of course, Jean Carroll herself during her testimony, loud enough that the jury, which is in the courtroom this time, it's not a bench trial, is able to hear it, which, of course, means essentially that he's able to, do the equivalent of introducing prejudicial evidence without review and without any of the, well, certainly no cross-examination, no examinations about its value beforehand, no validation of anything. He just sits there and mumbles, she's lying. Now she remembers. Sure, right. She's a crazy old coot. And various things that the jury can hear, which, on the jury, I'm sure they always think that the defendant is thinking that, but you can't blurt it out such that it influences the jury without it going through the filter of the judge, the opposing counsel, the rules of evidence, etc. And big exchange yesterday then between the judge saying, look, you're going to make me throw you out of here. And I know you want me to throw you out of there. I would love it. I would love it, says Trump. So widely quoted. It's interesting theatrics. Marcy Wheeler has another take on the theatrics that I can share with you later on. But it's not the most earth-changing news of the day. It's just that's where you have to go when the guy is also in the middle of running for president on the authoritarian fascist dictator ticket and apparently tied for the lead in the general election. So you want to pay attention to things like that. And this will be the backstory that's necessary to understand why we're now asking the question, what do you do if the guy who won the election or thinks he won the election is in jail? And is it okay, or do we make the vice president president, or what? Eventually we'll get to that question, I suppose. All right. Well, Greg Dworkin is here, and having collected bits and pieces of this story and others. Good morning. How you doing, Greg?
Good morning. I'd like to hear that theatrics part, because that'll be part of what I talk about too. So what does Marcy think of the theatrics?
Okay. Well, I know she's advancing an alternative theory. Let's see if I can. I mean, there's no way of making a Marcy Wheeler post quick.
Right.
Certainly.
I know she
see
thinks
if it's
that
in the
Trump,
headline.
let's not think he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yes, this is her headline was Donald Trump has chosen to pay millions to trash rule of law, and lead paragraph here is, I have the standing complaint that reporters usually fall into Trump's trap of reporting on his courtroom tantrums rather than the evidence of his fraud and the crimes presented, but basically going on to say he's a very good reality TV actor, and he's creating a scene for a particular reason here. But I don't see exactly in quick fashion a way to summarize this. But we'll see if we can scan it and reduce it down.
Probably in the end disparaging everything. But see, that leads to a theory I have.
Okay.
Not just that brontosauruses were fat in the middle and short on either end, but rather...
It's a theory.
It's a theory. It's a Monty Python theory. But I want to remind you of Al Bundy. Do you remember Al Bundy?
Sure. Why, though?
Fictional character,
Yeah.
right? Unmarried with Children, which, by the way, was a live-action sitcom in the late 80s, early 90s.
You mean...
And Al Bundy, the character backstory, is that he was a high school football star, a really good one.
Okay.
I think he scored 4 touchdowns in one game, which he never stopped talking about for the rest of his life.
Right.
Then he broke his leg, never went to college because he didn't get that scholarship, wound up marrying Peggy Wanker, his long-term sweetheart,
Okay.
who he now can't stand, and goes to work in his shoe salesman job, minimum wage, because he wants to get out of the house. And so, like, he had this one moment in life where he was good, and then he's been coasting on it ever since.
Okay, I see. I see where you're coming from.
Well, that's where Donald Trump is. He won this one election, and politically, he's been coasting on it ever since. So he
really
wins
win it.
Iowa,
Right.
and he basically spanks DeSantis and Haley in the vote total, even though for reasons we talked about on the show yesterday, you know, he's weaker than he looks, and we'll talk about that a little bit today too. Still, you know, he clobbers them. And then Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, who's endorsed Haley but said he'd vote for Trump if he wins, says, look, we were never thinking we were going to win New Hampshire. He said she was going to dominate New Hampshire like 2 weeks ago. We're never going to win New Hampshire. Our whole goal was to finish a strong second.
I see.
And he thinks he's talking about New Hampshire, but actually he's talking about the entire Republican primary.
Well, all right.
But the point is, she's a loser. And so, Trump hears this and says, well, you know, DeSantis, as Mark Caputo points it, is a dead campaign walking.
Yes.
In fact, Caputo's exact line is, Ron DeSantis' presidential bid is a dead campaign walking after Trump throttled him and must win Iowa. A year ago, DeSantis was the best hope for Republicans hoping to turn the page. Not anymore, of course. And then he goes on to say, we're at that stage of a presidential campaign's twilight where reporters, insiders, and influencers will buzz every hour with a new rumor of DeSantis dropping out. One day, one moment, it'll be true, but whether it's now, before, or after New Hampshire, South Carolina, only DeSantis knows. But it's over for him.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm willing to accept
And so
this.
Trump sees no reason to even go after DeSantis. He's ignoring him. He's going after Haley. And one of the things he says is that you can't vote for Haley, Republicans. If Haley is the nominee, we're going to lose the White House, the House, and the Senate for sure. She's terrible. She can't do anything.
Oh.
And, of course, the person who lost the White House, the House, and the Senate was Trump.
Well, that's how I know she's going to lose them, because I did.
And that's why I say he's Al Bundy. He had this one moment
Yeah,
when in
okay.
2016 he won, and the rest of the time he's Al Bundy in personality.
Yeah.
He's obnoxious, he's overbearing, he's everything that, you know, you dislike. However, for some people, that's entertainment.
I guess so, sure.
Right? You want to go back even further, you can remember the old days of I Love Lucy, where she would get into all sorts of fixes, some of which were so embarrassing and cringy you couldn't even watch them.
Yes.
Right? And that's Al Bundy, and that's Trump. But some people find it entertaining. And these were very popular shows. So you have this obnoxious jerk, you know, whether it's All in the Family, the head of All in the Family, or whether it's
Hey, you have a
married
formula
with
going
children.
here.
You have obnoxious people who nonetheless can be entertaining, and people watch it and they like it and they'll come back for more.
That is
That's
true.
Trump rally. That's Trump. He's Al Bundy. All right. Now, am I going to vote for Al Bundy? Can I understand why Al Bundy is appealing? No and no. Would I want Al Bundy like in my house? No. Would I want to have a beer with Al Bundy? No. None of those things. And yet, you know, those shows were popular.
That's true. We do have that to deal with.
So I look at
It's a common theme.
Yeah. So I look at
Really have something there. Okay.
I look at
to write a
Trump
show
and I think, okay, that's what's going on here. And so you're never going to take away from those people who think it's entertaining the idea that, you know, it's entertaining. That's why it's more important that his rallies are boring than it is that he gets convicted in court.
Oh.
And that's,
All right.
I think where Marcy is coming from is if you don't focus on the fact that he's guilty in court or liable in court, if it's civil, then you're missing the point. And there are some voters who will not vote for him, a lot, according to the polls, if he's convicted of these things. And there's another segment of voters, different segment, completely different segment, that don't care about any of that, but may not vote for him. They may stay home if he's boring.
Okay.
And that's why McKay Coppins pointing out that Trump's rallies are starting to get a little boring and stale is interesting and significant. That actually may have some political blowback of a different sort than Marcy's point that, reporters ought to cover policy instead of horse race, and reporters ought to cover court stuff instead of horse race. But, of course, reporters are only going to cover horse race because they're in the entertainment business.
Yeah, I guess so. Although it's interesting that he calls attention over to the trials by making it the same kind of stupid spectacle that they
what's he
usually
going to?
love.
He's going to
I
win
don't know what
some
else he's
voters,
gonna
the
do.
entertainment voters, but
I
he's going
guess
to
so.
lose the voters, in the suburbs. And this gets to one of the more important, observations about what's been going on with the polls. And this is a discussion that G. Elliott Morris. And by the way, to set the stage, I do want to give this perspective. And that is when G. Elliott Morris steps back, and he's the guy that runs 538 now instead of Nate Silver. So statistician and, runs the website that collates all the polls. And basically what he said is, look, if I had to step back and look at the big picture here, I think Biden's ahead and he's going to win. Okay. And he says, if I had to, put a number on it, it'd probably be about 55 to 60% at this point. And, goes through a couple of the reasons why. But separately, one of the really interesting discussions that people have been having is, well, then why do the polls show what they show? Why do people talk about whether or not low tendency voters show up or don't show up? Why is all of that important? And the answer is they tend to be Democratic leaning.
Low, okay, yeah.
Right? They tend to be the most difficult group to poll and reach. They're the ones that won't answer their phones, who are savvy enough to say, I don't know what this call is, I'm not taking it.
Right.
Right? And so you don't really know what they're going to do, especially now. When has anybody ever known what the youngest cohort of voters is going to do a year before the polls open?
That's true.
These are the people that show up on the last day. These are not the people that vote early.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really difficult to know, poll, or model them. And if that's the case, the big, if you will, swing demographic in trying to figure out how should I put the poll together and tell you where people are at is that group. And if you think you reach them and they say they're voting for Biden, then Biden is okay in the polls. And if you reach them and you think these are people that are low propensity voters, and if they show up, they're not happy with Biden right now, so Biden looks really bad in the polls.
Okay.
And the truth is nobody knows, because nobody really knows what to do with that cohort of people right now. And it's one of the main reasons why you shouldn't worry too much about what the polls are showing. What the polls are showing, by the way, is essentially a tie. And that's before the Biden campaign gets going. That's before the Biden campaign starts to energize and activate his voters, whereas Trump's trial stuff, which I think Marcy is astutely pointing out, is how Trump activates his voters.
Yes.
And by doing so, he brings it to a tie.
I guess so. Okay.
He doesn't go
That's
ahead.
Where he is.
He brings it to a tie at best. And that's one of the reasons why G. Elliott Morris is stepping back and saying, look, if I look at the overall big picture, it's tied now, but that doesn't mean it will be in November, and I have to give the edge to Biden.
Okay. I'm willing to accept it.
So, that's the theory of the case that we're working with as well.
All right.
So, meanwhile, This is we featured the Atlantic yesterday with a number of articles.
Yes.
Today we're going to do the Bulwark.
They should pay us for this. Jeez. Yeah. All right. Similar ad for the Bulwark, just because you've read it and liked it, and not
just
because
they had a
giving
bunch
us
of
any
good
money.
articles that people should know about. So
Holy
this one is from
mackerel.
Charlie Sykes, starting with Iowa.
Okay.
Dominant but vulnerable is his headline. Sounds exactly what I was saying the other day.
A little
Iowa's
odd.
mixed message.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, lest there was any lingering doubt, the Iowa caucus has confirmed Trump's dominance in the GOP, crushing the opposition. But that's only part of the story, and perhaps not the most important one. Iowa also revealed how weak Trump may be in the general election. Joe Perticone takes a closer look at the numbers. There was, in the end, when they finally totaled it, just over 110,000. I had it at 108. It was certainly nowhere near the 187,000 in 2016.
Right.
Some voters stayed home because of the cold snap, says Perticone. It was 30 degrees below freezing in Iowa last night, notwithstanding Trump's invitation for them to take their lives into their own hands. He said basically, I don't care if it's cold or you die, you have to go vote.
Right. Yeah, you and Herman Cain.
Yeah. But registering only around 3 votes for every 5 cast the last time there was an open primary suggests it could be a real enthusiasm problem here.
Ah, where's my
Enthusiasm.
Okay, that's the problem.
You notice that dramatic pause allowing you to go find it. And in addition, find the others because we may need them.
All
and
right.
in addition to this year's
Let's
low turnout, consider the fact that Trump, a quasi-incumbent with greater name recognition than anyone alive, earned the votes of just over half the state's caucus goers, the most committed members of Iowa's GOP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He doesn't.
What do we have for that? I don't know. Okay.
I'm just saying, maybe Taylor Swift has the same greater name recognition than anybody else, but
Right.
even so, let's break it down even further. Only about 14 to 15% of GOP voters showed up. Trump's
Okay.
landslide total comprised 8% of Iowa Republicans.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
That's a low number. I don't think I have a sound effect for it, but all right.
A substantial number of Republican voters are signaling they're never Trump. The NBC reports nearly half of Haley's Iowa backers say they'd vote for Biden over Trump. We heard about that. Mona Charan noted yesterday the pre-caucus poll by the Des Moines Register found that 25% of Iowa Republican caucus goers say they won't vote for Trump in November. That's a significant number given that Iowa Republican caucus goers are incredibly conservative and representative of the Republican Party these days, more so than New Hampshire.
Okay.
And that's reflected in some on-the-ground reporting from the Dispatch. That's Jonah Goldberg's conservative site.
Yeesh.
It's remarkable how many Iowa voters backing Ron DeSantis and Nikkki Haley told the Dispatch some version of the same thing. If he's the nominee, count them out. I can't believe that out of 340 million Americans, these are the 2 best options we can come up with. But yeah, I can't see myself voting for Trump under any circumstances. He's an insurrectionist and a criminal. I won't support him.
Oh, all right.
Now, if a substantial number of Republicans say that, he loses. I'm just pointing that out. Biden has a problem with voters who are in denial. Iowa could help him. Biden's internal polling, as a quote, shows the vast majority of the campaign's targeted voters don't believe Trump will be the GOP nominee, a major issue for a campaign desperate to make 2024 a binary choice. Well, I don't know about being desperate, but it's too early to worry about that.
Yeah.
They are going to do this, though, and Trump will be the nominee, and that should take care of the issue.
I guess so.
Biden's campaign is worried
go.
because unless he's running against Trump, he can't use all of his, Trump oppo.
Wow.
Well,
So-
it will be running against Trump, so that problem solves itself. And then there were the
guess
trials.
so.
Charlie
Okay.
Sykes adds, and Trump's decision to campaign from courtrooms across the country. Yesterday, he showed
that's
up at
what
the E.
she's
Jean
saying.
Carroll defamation trial, sitting a few feet away from the woman that a federal judge has said that he raped.
Yes.
He's liable for rape. He's not guilty.
Right.
I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyers keep making this distinction, so I suppose it means something.
It does. No jail.
Yeah. But all the commentators who aren't lawyers are saying, look, he's guilty.
Yes. I mean,
You make the distinction,
Okay.
pedant.
Yes. All right. I don't know what to
He's
tell
guilty.
you. It's, right. He's been found. Yeah. That's the
Legally,
right
he's
word.
been found
Liable.
liable.
Yeah. Right.
Right?
The difference between a civil suit and a criminal trial.
Yeah, we get all of that. But he's
Right.
guilty. He did it.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
the
You can't say he
He's done
didn't.
it.
That's for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So via NBC, Trump's quick hop from a victory speech on Monday night in Iowa to a courtroom in New York on Tuesday to a rally in New Hampshire Tuesday night is a microcosm of the former president's coming year, where he's expected to oscillate between campaigning and court cases, including 4 pending criminal trials. And he clearly relishes posing as a martyr, successfully leveraging the indictments and lawsuits to rally the GOP, and has now convinced himself a courtroom strategy is political genius because he's Al Bundy, who, by the way, is no genius. He believes the optics of a former president in the dock display strength, defiance, in a man besieged by his enemies. And he's not completely wrong as long as it's appealing to his own base. But how is that going to play in the general? The federal judge in the case said the verdict meant Trump raped E. Jean Carroll. Even though he was found liable for sexual assault. Those are the words. The federal judge later said that meant he raped her.
Yeah.
Right? The finding that Carroll failed to prove she was raped within the meaning of the New York penal law does not mean she failed to prove Mr. Trump raped her, as many people commonly understand the word. The judge explained that New York's legal definition of term, and this is Kaplan, the guy who's doing the trial now, is far narrower than the word rape is understood in common modern parlance. Indeed, as the evidence at trial recounted below makes clear, the jury found Mr. Trump, in fact, did exactly that. Now, that ruling is unambiguous. It's blunt, as Charlie Sykes writes. And since he can't restrain himself, Trump continued to smear his victim, thus the latest defamation trial, which he's also likely to lose.
Yes.
Okay. Now, about that trial, by the way.
Yes.
Haba asked for a recess so Trump could be with his wife mourning the mother-in-law.
Right.
And Kaplan said, no, I already ruled on that. Sit down.
Yeah.
And that came up several times where he told her to sit down, in addition to teaching her how to enter evidence.
Yes.
She's bad at this, but that's because she's not a trial lawyer.
Well, you're going to have to learn quickly if you're going to show up at trial. She's a trial lawyer now, and now's not the time to learn this stuff. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
Where is this trial?
This trial, well, it's right here on Netroots Radio, by God. We're back. Hello, everybody, returning to the
physical
show.
Location of this
trial? It's in New York, isn't it?
I don't know.
It is, I'm pretty sure. But you know what? I haven't been, Manhattan Federal Court.
Okay. Oh, it's federal court. So
yes,
it's a
it
federal
is.
Trial, right? I mean, that's the part I was missing here.
No TV cameras. Right.
So if you want to be a lawyer and present stuff at a federal trial, is it different for a federal versus state member of the bar?
No, you can practice before the federal courts as a member of the
state bar.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually you know what? I'm not a practicing lawyer, but they admit you have right.
Stood up and said something, and Kaplan said, "Are you a member of the bar able to do this?" And Kaplan didn't like Epstein's answer and told him to sit down too.
Oh, well, all right, that would be a problem. Like, I don't know if he's admitted it. I would think I don't know where Epstein is based
because he's not a
practicing bar in New York.
Lawyer.
Okay,
he's basically a campaign guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a thing. You have to maintain a bar membership in order to actually practice in court on someone else's behalf. So, I mean, and it may be that he hasn't done that because it could cost him up to $100 a year or something like that to maintain his bar status. So, my goodness, he's not going to want to. I'm just wondering. So, who's at the table
you sell
for
a few
him?
taxi medallions.
I guess so.
You're there.
But that's the other guy. But yeah, I'm curious about who's at the table, given that Alina Habba appears to be so terrible at trial procedure. You mentioned that one of his lawyers dropped out. That's Joe Tacopina. I've just grabbed the ABC News story on it just to try to figure out who's there on his behalf. And I see Boris Epstein at the table.
Here's a story from Salon.
Okay.
And Boris Epstein stood up at the trial and said something. And Kaplan said to him, quote, "Are you a member of the bar of this court?"
Okay.
And he didn't like the answer, and he said, "Take a seat."
Oh, all right. Well, I mean, I guess the answer was no then. Unless it's...
So I have to see what the exact quote. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't follow this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the New York State Bar, Epstein replied. Kaplan swiftly put the matter to rest, quickly saying, "All right, then please have a seat."
Okay.
So maybe that wasn't the reason.
I guess my recollection of it...
He just didn't want him speaking.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. My recollection, like I said, I've not practiced. And my recollection, though, in passing the bar in Virginia was that once you've done that, you can, more or less, as of right, then be admitted to all practice throughout the state, including federal courts. But, you make an application. And did you just pass the bar in Virginia? I did. Okay. Well, in that case, yes, sure. But you have to go through the paperwork, and you're admitted to practice in federal courts in Virginia, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, if necessary. I mean, you can get admitted to that. But yeah, I guess if you don't do the paperwork, then that's the question. So he would. That's why he would answer. I would New York.
Him to sit down because he didn't like his answer about the bar, or he just told him to sit down because he didn't like his answer. I don't know.
I think it may be
a judge, and it's his courtroom.
It sounds like. I mean, it sounds like Epstein. I guess if he's not a practicing attorney, he probably hasn't maintained federal courts admission in New York, and so he gave the answer, which is, "Well, I'm a member of the bar in the state of New York," which means that had I then filled out the paperwork, I would have been admitted to practice before this court, but I didn't do that because in that case, the answer to the question is yes if you did the work and no if you didn't. Not I was entitled to do the work, but I didn't. That's not a good answer. That's a sit down, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, part of the deal there, again, part of the backstory. Is that Epstein being on the team led to yet another different Trump lawyer leaving because he didn't want to be in the same room with Epstein.
That's very strange.
So there's a lot going on. In other words, Epstein and Habba are the lawyers who were willing to work with Trump, and like the real lawyers who would be otherwise conducting the trial as trial lawyers and are professionals really don't want to have anything to do with this team, and that's all part and parcel of what's going on.
I guess that has to. I mean, that's must be what's stemming from this picture, this photo. Must be irksome to be the trial lawyer and have hangers-on placing themselves at the table so that they can be in photos with Donald Trump. But you're of no help to me at the trial. You're actually just taking up table space here. Why don't you leave? No, I'm a very important person. I whisper in Donald Trump's ear. Well, not during this trial, you don't. Well, I'm going to try anyway. And then the trial lawyer says, well, in that case, I'm leaving. And then you can sit next to him and whisper in his ear.
Right. What Salon said was, Rolling Stone reported last year that Epstein's presence on the team led to the departure of former Trump lawyer Drew Findling.
Oh, last year.
The same kind of power struggles that have long plagued Trump's legal teams, even or especially during times when Trump is trying his hardest to stay out of prison, the Rolling Stone piece added.
All right.
So, again, there's more to the backstory than just Habba isn't very good at trial stuff. I mean, there's a reason why she's the last one standing there.
And that's what I was getting at. What is she doing if she really doesn't know? Did she tell him she did and fooled him? Or is it just, well, I need somebody who's admitted to the bar
Kaplan?
Here. Trump.
I don't know. He doesn't care.
Yeah, Kaplan just figured, I don't know, you've got a bar number. I mean, if you want to conduct this trial, you're entitled to, even if you're not a trial lawyer. You can. You're just not going to do a good job.
Right. So it's harder. And then Charlie Sykes goes on to make the case that this is going to sound strange.
Is he admitted to the bar in this? All right, yeah.
Well, he's making the case in the court of public opinion, to which he has admitted as a member of the bulwark, that as much as you and I may understand what's going on here with this liable versus guilt stuff, most of the public doesn't have any idea that a court has said he's a rapist.
Yes, not
and
a
it's harder to
therapist.
see how a
He's
renewed and dramatically
rapist.
heightened focus on the rapist president will win over any of the swing voters who are going to decide the 2024 election. Remember, we're talking about those low-propensity Democratic voters and others.
I think they'll find rapist a bad thing.
Trump seems certain that nothing matters and that he could shoot blah, 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 blah. But Axios notes, while 65% of caucus goers said they would still consider Trump fit for president, 31% said they would not. The number I got was 32. We talked about that yesterday on the show. And Axios says that could be huge in the general election, which a few thousand swing voters in a few swing states could see a Trump conviction as a reason to sit it out or vote for Biden. They don't have to vote for Biden. They can stay home. And that's why, also in the bulwark.
Can they? Yeah.
They can. We have this piece from Jonathan V. Last, J.B. Last, The Shape of Things to Come. The future's Trump, and Trump is going to continue to misunderestimate Joe Biden.
All right. Yeah, he'll want to do that.
Let's start with the important number. 293 days away from the election.
Okay.
And barring an act of God, Trump will be the Republican nominee. All the fantasies about DeSantis and Haley stopping him have been obliterated. We have real votes from real Republicans. They want Trump. 98 of 99 counties. I think Haley won Iowa City County, whatever it is, Johnson County, by 1 vote or something like that. And Trump won all the others.
Fraud.
Trump won urban voters by 20 points over his nearest rival. He won by 31 with rural voters. Trump won college-educated voters by 9, high school-educated voters by 51.
Okay.
Go Al Bundy. The Al Bundys of the world voted for Trump.
Right, 4 times in the same game.
None of this was a surprise. Trump performed exactly in line with polling. The only people who didn't understand the will of the Republican electorate were those who didn't want to. And from here we go to New Hampshire. And what will happen? Well, it's overwhelmingly likely to win New Hampshire. And Ron DeSantis is going to finish in single digits. And then what? Does DeSantis pretend he's soldiering on to South Carolina? Does Haley stay in so she can get smoked in Nevada? And then lose her home state by 20 points? I doubt it.
Oh.
So here's the second most important number, 49 days away from Super Tuesday.
That is super.
Okay? There won't be a contest because Trump will have won all the previous elections. There won't be any Republicans left by then. All right? And on the night of March 5th, Donald Trump will look invincible, and you should prepare yourself for that. That's the way the press will cover him. He won't be. When Trump hits this moment, I expect a general freak out as the media focuses on horse race politics and can't figure out how to handle an authoritarian who's on track to recapture the presidency. But to be honest, I think horse race politics gets a bad rap, he says. It's important to understand who's up and who's down because that's a starting point for seeing around the corner. That's what we're here to do over the next 293 days. We take in the entire picture, the horse race, the political dynamics, the economy, the foreign policy. Sounds like our show, David.
Yes, but do they take in the entire picture?
From Joe Perticone's Press Pass newsletter to Eric Edelman and Elliot Cohn's Shield of the Republic, we got broad, we got deep, and we do it while being on the side of liberalism and democracy. No both sides, no kabuki. And guess what? Joe Biden's strengths are mostly hidden. He doesn't have a cult of personality. He doesn't dominate the media. He doesn't engender strong feelings either for or against. His party is not afraid of him. In a race that will be run as a contract election designed to create a referendum on Trump, these are all advantages. The economy is in good shape. The longer this winning streak continues, the more fully its effects are felt by voters. I don't know if he has it in this piece, but you heard about Asa Hutchinson dropping out?
I did.
I heard about a Democratic staffer saying, I didn't know you were still in the race. And that was perceived as being very rude.
It is.
And the chief of staff, Jeff Zients, called Hutchinson and apologized on behalf of Biden. And Hutchinson said, that's very gracious.
Well,
now, this may look old world to people, but that's how Biden wins.
Okay.
By being a decent guy.
Okay. I'm certainly in the face of the opposition. I mean,
running against Al Bundy.
You're not going to out-Trump him, that's for sure.
right? The economy is in very good shape. The longer this winning streak continues, the more fully its effects are felt by voters. Now, it annoys people who want to be super hyper partisan, but the super hyper partisans don't, always decide elections. Sometimes they do because they're the ones that turn out, but in very close elections, it's usually the persuadables that do.
That one persuadable in that county.
That race with Tom Keene, K-E-E-N, that we won in Florida the other day on Tuesday.
Ah, yes, K-E-E.
More Republicans turned out. Therefore, the only way the Democrat wins is by persuasion.
So more Republicans turned out, but some of them must have voted for. They worked with Democrats.
They must have.
I'm going to declare that county vacant.
Yeah. Biden has a long list of legislative accomplishments which are broadly popular. Taken together, they create a rationale for his reelection. Vote for Biden, and he will continue to work with Republicans to pass laws that create jobs, invest in infrastructure, reform the least popular parts of gun laws, etc. That's another contrast with Trump, who has no actual policy rationale other than personal retribution, stopping immigration, and drilling for oil.
Keep me out of jail.
Which, by the way, Biden has done more of than any president in history, including Trump.
Hooray. That's bad, but all right.
Well, it is bad, and that's why he doesn't trumpet it, but the fact of the matter is he has.
Yeah. That I guess that's supposed to mean something to people who vote on the oil issue, but I just don't think there are any.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the difference between policy and, sexy voting commercials that get people to buy the product.
Yeah.
But the fact is that that keeps gas prices down.
Yeah.
And that does make people vote.
Okay.
He just doesn't want to talk about why gas prices are down.
Sure. And I can understand why, but it's, all right. Well, it
otherwise
a weird
known as compromising in the real world.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess that explains it.
Making tough decisions when you're the leader. The buck stops here. That sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of Biden stuff that he does that you don't like, that I don't like, that people don't like.
That is
true.
I'm aware of that.
Given the alternatives, you got to make some of those choices, and you're not going to like all of them.
No.
Welcome to being a grown-up. I'm sorry.
No. Well, that's true. I mean, it's not the sort of thing that's going to make me
Republican way
angry.
In the House. You can try to have your way all the time on everything, and look where they got.
But it feels great.
Does it?
Briefly. Scream.
Ask Kevin McCarthy how good it feels. Ask what kind of a great time Mike Johnson's having right now.
Oh, yeah, well, but the payoff is when you get fired and you go back home and you say, this is all right.
And Marjorie Taylor Greene is still there. Yeah, I get that, but, that's not the same thing as governance. So Trump will continue to face criminal proceedings, and unlike in the primaries, where this fact was helpful to Trump in the general election, everything about these trials is going to hurt him.
All right. When?
One more thing.
Yeah.
Biden is always underestimated. People think, when? November 24.
Okay.
People think he's slow and out of it, but every time he gives a major speech, they're surprised by how good he is. His January 5th speech on the anniversary of the insurrection, his set of October speeches about Hamas, his February 2023 State of the Union, where he absolutely owned congressional Republicans.
Oh.
People thought Biden wouldn't be able to govern with such a slim majority, but he has the most legislatively productive first term in a generation. Do you know who that reminds you of? Nancy Pelosi.
Hey, well, she was there at the same time.
And nobody thought she was out of it and didn't have the smarts to do her job.
Right. But, yeah. Now she's not in the majority anymore. And
this is a conservative Republican writing. People thought Biden wouldn't be able to work with Republicans. Most of his signature accomplishments were bipartisan. Infrastructure, chips, gun reform, electoral count reform, Respect for Marriage Act. People thought Biden would be weak on Ukraine. He's managed to build and maintain a wide Western coalition that's helped Ukraine deliver devastating losses to Russia. People thought Biden wouldn't know what to do with Netanyahu's government, but Biden simultaneously stood firmly with Israel, resisted the American left, boxed Netanyahu in politically, and drove wedges, is driving wedges, between Bibi and Israel's hard right, all of which is true, by the way.
Well,
People thought we were sure to hit a recession. Biden beat inflation and achieved a soft landing. Biden's like the Terminator of presidenting, a single-minded machine programmed to pass legislation, conduct diplomacy, avoid culture wars, move the ball forward on policy issues like insulin prices and rural broadband access, relentlessly, remorselessly. And here's the thing that is 100% true about Trump and MAGA. They can't fathom how could they have lost to Biden because Biden doesn't compete on TV. They think political victory comes from giant rallies and media manipulation, culture war crusades, and crap posting. That is the Republican House.
Yes.
And Biden doesn't play any of those games. He just governs. And it's clear that over the last 7 years, MAGA and Trump haven't figured out how to run against that.
Okay. I mean...
So those are all great points.
Yes. Yes. I might not have made them the same way. They don't leave you
satisfied. It's like having your vegetables. They're good for you.
Yeah. I mean, but that's dessert. Okay with me. I've never. I want to eat dessert.
I don't want to eat that regular nutrition crap. Why are you spending so much time planning out your meals for the week and giving me, starches and protein and all that stuff? And, I just want dessert. Mm. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Well, no.
You can have dessert, but, it's
then you'll be disease-ridden and have sores on your hands and be an unhealthy kind of
lots
person,
of clogged arteries and all sorts of other stuff.
Not good for you, but certainly not exciting. But all good points. I mean, some of them better than others, and I don't know if I'm seeing this wedge between Netanyahu and the Israeli right, but that's not his job necessarily. That's a different country. But good work.
Gallant
if you can
has
do
said
it.
The Palestinians are going to have to govern Gaza. And Netanyahu's right-wing cabinet said, no, that'll never happen. And Benny Gantz and other people are saying, the way the war is being conducted right now is terrible because they're not making any decisions. And Smotrich and Ben Gvir over on the right saying, no, that can't happen. I mean, we're seeing it in the press. We're seeing it live. Now, that doesn't mean that Netanyahu is out.
I'm avoiding it. Yes.
That's what people are looking at to say, okay, well, why haven't you done this? Well, because it's another country and you can't do that. Mm-hmm. But wedges, absolutely.
Okay.
Documented.
Excellent. I have not read the documentation. Have you marked it for introduction into evidence?
Overnight, yes.
All right. Well, then that's a good
it's
first
People's
step.
Exhibit B.
You show it to me. I do not recognize this document, however. But it's only because I have not read it. But
it's People's Exhibit Aleph B.
Yeah. Right. That doesn't mean you can't enter it into evidence. It's verifiable where, it was reported and printed.
Look, I see on TV all the time the lawyers turning to the judge or whoever and saying, I'd like to enter this as evidence.
Yeah,
and
right.
They always say, okay, well, fine.
That's because there's this. I guess when you're writing a courtroom drama, you go and observe how things work, and then you reflect that in the writing. And
and
she
you
hasn't
can't say
done that.
No. Shut up and sit down.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that because the characters, it wouldn't make any sense for your show if it's a courtroom drama for half the cast to portray characters who have not figured out how to conduct a trial and are unprepared to do so. You won't get your courtroom drama that way. So maybe they need to add that, just like I say they need to add more on-screen time with the proper loading and unloading of semi-automatic weapons. It's a very cool-looking thing for people who love gun stuff. You'll satisfy all of that except for the bang-bang part. But do it on screen to show the reality of it. And here, it might not be a bad idea once in a while to say,
bottom line, when you
can't introduce that document.
Is that Biden is doing all these things that you could look and say, well, that's not going to win elections. That's not how you persuade people. That's not how you hit them where their emotions are. That's not how you do this. He won last time by doing this. And Trump has lost all the other times except for that one Al Bundy high school game.
And that's not to say that other people can't do that job. It's a surrogate's job, perhaps.
Right.
And I guess the bulwark is the surrogate today.
All never-Trumpers are going to be surrogates because they're going to be never-Trump.
Yeah, well, they can't be Trump, so they have to be surrogate for something else.
And that's one of the reasons why you should never dismiss never-Trumpers, and that's why it was important that Biden apologized to Asa Hutchinson.
Okay. I mean, he didn't need to do that, but it was nice that he did.
He did. He needed to do that.
In the sense that, people expect that. Like, Trump would prove, no, you don't. You don't need to. Well, you don't need to if you want to lose. It was becoming
a topic of conversation,
I see what
which
you
is
mean.
Absurd and ridiculous. It was some low-level intern who just blew it.
Yeah.
And screwed up, and Biden took care of it and made it not an issue, and that's what he does. Mm-hmm. And that's how come all these other things that could have been issues aren't issues.
Okay.
The big ones are still there because they're difficult to, why is Middle East peace not fixed?
Have you asked an intern to do it?
How many weeks do you have for me to explain that?
Oh, well, I mean, then there's the other
Did you see the Iranians are now attacking Pakistan?
The Iranians are attacking everybody, yes. I've seen that. So
their campaign is going well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, their campaign for regional war. Yes. True.
Part of the whole reason that Hamas did what they did is that things were actually, looking like stuff might actually get done. They didn't want that. They wanted to be disruptive. So do the Iranians. So that's, part and parcel of what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, the Iranians always on the lookout for, and they're able to find it everywhere. There's an oppressed minority of Muslim, I guess the various sects of Islam and various practices. You can always find somebody who's being stomped by a majority somewhere. And I guess to the extent that they're irritated by it, if you provide them with, propaganda and or weapons, I suppose they can make trouble for people.
You could argue that, look, Iran and Hamas are making trouble because U.S. policy failed. Actually, it was because it was succeeding that they started to make trouble because they didn't like it.
They don't like it when we, succeed there. And it's not hard to understand.
Right. Now, there's a bunch of other problems that I don't mean to gloss over, the apartheid nature of what's going on there and the deaths and all in Gaza. It's horrible. It's awful. It shouldn't happen. Israel needs to pull back. They're wrong. But Hamas, October 7th, all that stuff happened. And, just like after 9/11 here, there's going to be a response. And it's crazy to think there won't be.
Yes. You just hope that there's somebody,
and that's where Netanyahu comes in because he's awful and he has to go.
That's
as Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, said. He's terrible. He's an awful leader. He's moving us in the wrong direction. Josh Shapiro has great political instincts. He's absolutely right. But that's all part and parcel of what's going on here. And by the way, some of that stuff takes time, and people don't like to give political leaders time. They just don't.
Well, But that's the job. Keep pressure on them.
Anyway, it's not posturing
to take
so that
time.
Marjorie Taylor Greene can say, I told Mike Johnson what to do, and if he dares bring up Ukrainian support, I will bring up a motion to vacate.
That's okay, Marjorie.
Well, everybody expected that, so what?
Yeah. Right. Everybody expected you to be on the other side of the Kevin McCarthy thing, and you weren't.
Right. So the Bulwark. Here's another piece, Jill Lawrence. Here's why DeSantis should be losing. And then she goes into all the things that DeSantis does that are just awful.
He's a robot.
From COVID denial on downward. What he's doing with the schools in Florida. Making America Florida, whether you want it or not.
Right.
Firing of Andrew Warren, twice elected Tampa area prosecutor who publicly criticized him. She goes through the whole list.
Okay.
Not everybody will agree with everything or even anything on my personal checklist, she says, but I hope voters are noticing, if they haven't already, that DeSantis would make for an overbearing, cocksure president with alarming public health policies who likes to punish his political enemies. And does that remind you of anyone?
It does. And I guess that was his intent, was to be, but remember, he was supposed to be the Trump with competence.
Right, exactly. But no.
Yeah.
And people don't understand. They don't want Trump's policies. They're willing to forgive his policies. They want Trump. They want the entertainer. They want the person. It is a personality-led party.
Yeah.
And no other person is going to be a substitute because they're not entertaining. Ron DeSantis least of all.
Yeah, I guess that was his total miscalculation. In hindsight, looking back on that and saying, what they really wanted was policy is ridiculous.
No, come on. They never want policy.
What's wrong with you?
It's like you did Married with Children and you brought in Al Bundy's friend to take over the show. Nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Al Bundy's the entertaining guy.
Yeah. I guess that it is interesting. Yeah. But he was being fed, like all of us, opinion pieces that said the real power and the real danger lies in a competent, policy-oriented, smarter Trump. And he figured, I could be that. But yeah, in hindsight, it's no. Trump was a supremely, and still is, unfortunately, a supremely confident operator, and DeSantis is like maybe barely beyond complete seizure and social anxiety, and he can't stride confidently into a room and win people over with wearing Smurf boots and and robot grins, for one thing. I mean, it's not that you can't do it in lifts. Trump did, but he just, it was a personality thing. And he really thought, I don't know, I guess because he read if you can execute policy, you can just steal his policies, but he can't even do that.
Let's finish where we started.
Oh.
It's all about entertainment. And DeSantis didn't recognize who the star is.
Yeah.
Back in the day,
all right,
I Dream of Jeannie, Larry Hagman played Major Nelson, and he left the show, and his best friend took over, and it didn't matter because Jeannie was the star.
Well, it wasn't I Dream of Larry Hagman.
Larry Hagman goes on to be JR, the star of Dallas.
Yeah.
And that worked out for him. But as far as the show goes, DeSantis thought, well, I'll just be, Major Nelson's friend. That's not how it goes. On Bewitched, they changed husbands. Nobody noticed because the star was, the witch.
It's not Bedarand.
Right. And so DeSantis misread all of that and thought, I'll just switch in and nobody will know. But that's not how it works. You can't replace the star.
No.
You couldn't replace Jeannie. You can't replace, I
mean, you can launch a different show if you want, but I guess
that's
you can't.
Not the same thing.
No.
So he got it all wrong. He didn't understand the entertainment part of it. Still doesn't. And basically that's why he lost. So Bill Scher finishes up.
Given anything.
This time in the Washington Monthly, not the Bulwark. Forget New Hampshire. After Trump's Iowa landslide, it's over. Hawkeye State rarely predicts a GOP nominee, but with Trump, it did.
Well, okay.
So you can waste your time talking about, and we will on Monday.
About that.
I'll waste your time.
Oh, all right. Yes.
Talking about
Excellent.
New Hampshire, but it doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, all right. They're right about Iowa rarely producing the nominee, but always under very different conditions. This is a very weird thing, not just because Trump and he's weird and non-traditional, but the running as essentially an incumbent. Iowa predicts the nominee just fine when it's a Republican incumbent running for re-election every time. But this is a little bit more like that than your normal traditional open field thing. All right, fair enough there. And I would have loved to have seen, what DeSantis did not try, and I would have advised him to try, is paint yourself orange. I would love to have seen him actually try that.
He should have done purple.
I would pick any color, I guess that's true, but that one I would have been like, that would have been so
Star Trek
obvious.
episodes and pick a color.
Okay. Yeah, right. It doesn't matter. I don't see color, they all say. We'll see you Monday, though. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are back, by the way. The live stream is on and up, and we're doing we were doing the live show anyway before, but we were just doing it in secret with a bag over our heads and then releasing the podcast afterwards. But congratulations to Justice and the entire Pacific Northwest for unthawing and getting the internet back up and running. I understand he fixed it himself. So that's great, and all of you in the entire region can thank him by, making donations to Netroots Radio, for one thing. I don't know that any amount of donations would have fixed the fact that freezing weather knocked down the internet, but something, and we'll invent an alternative and become bazillionaires, and we'll let you know how that goes pretty soon. All right, turning to all the other things that I wanted to discuss, and we only got to touch on because we had to zoom our way through the rest of the news. Oh, let's see. Wait a minute. This just in, getting late breaking news from Greg here. Oh, about the Tom Keene race down in Florida. What is going on? Before Election Day, more Democrats had voted than Republicans. All right. Yeah. Oh, this was an interesting thing. I kind of wanted to dive into that. I just had to take it at face value that more Republicans than Democrats had turned out in the race, and yet the Democrat had won. We probably should have looked a little deeper into that. Before Election Day, more Democrats had voted than Republicans. So early voting, I guess, dominated by Democrats. That shifted in mid-afternoon on Election Day. Unofficial turnout reports showed that between Orange and Osceola counties, some 4,248 Republicans turned out compared to 2,621 Democrats, and 1,187 no-party-affiliated voters. Okay. But despite the turnout deficit, Keene won by 590 votes, according to unofficial final results. The link linked article provided here. A look at registration rolls shows that the race was a true battleground, especially after both parties prioritized voter registration and vote by mail requests. As of the December 18th registration deadline to vote in this race, the 37,389 registered Democrats barely outnumber 37,155 registered Republicans. Then there are the no party affiliated voters out there as well. And they're out there as well, like an afterthought. Well, keep in mind that voters with no party affiliation outnumber both groups just barely. I guess 37,786. So really, like, legitimately split three ways between Democrats, Republicans, and no party. Though turnout is traditionally low among independents because they have no party and no one, I guess, to rally them on a partisan basis. Traditionally low among independents, usually in unusually timed races like special elections, and this appears to be no exception. Okay. So, but still interesting in itself, just as a headline. More Republicans turned out than Democrats, and then still, there you go. There's your result. And I guess, right, yeah, he's saying, well, try and poll no party affiliations. They, Greg is claiming, are hard, just like low turnout young Dems. It might not be because they have learned not to answer the phone necessarily, but because they won't give you any answers if they do answer the phone. What party are you affiliated with? None. And, also it's difficult to know. For years, we were, of course, convinced that, well, if you're telling people you're an independent, you're really a Republican. And I guess that was probably true for a long time. But I guess, I guess Trump distorts everything where, you could be. That's true. You are a Republican, but you're an embarrassed Republican. We were always saying that. And then wondering, how come they're not so embarrassed on Election Day to vote for Republicans? And I guess now we're finding out what it takes to make somebody who keeps telling us they're really an embarrassed Republican to actually be embarrassed. It is the guys on trial for all sorts of crimes, has been found liable for rape, etc. And I guess that's perhaps what it takes. And as Greg is saying, persuasion, remember, persuasion for the win. And then I guess that's the upshot of persuasion. If you've actually an embarrassed Republican, whether you did the persuading or Trump did, I guess doesn't matter so long as they're persuaded in the end. All right, just interesting to note, and I guess a good follow-up on, hey, how did that happen then if more Republicans turned out than Democrats? And the answer is, there's other people out there. And in fact, they're about a third of the electorate in this district and probably about nearly a third in most districts. Okay, very good. Thank you for that follow-up. That helps clear things up. All right, I wanted to turn back to, well, let's see. First of all, I was thinking it might do well to read for my own edification this ABC News report on how the team representing Trump in court composed itself and how it came to be. Oh, and while Greg is still listening, I should probably do this too. I got a note via Patreon, which has, a feedback system and a sort of an internal messaging mechanism to it. So another pipeline of information that I have to keep an eye on. But I wanted to tell Greg that, let's see, I've parked it here somewhere, a way to quickly find and identify this thing. But I might have to then, did it come out this way? Will it take me to the right page? On the Patreon notifications page. Oh, I got another notification. I'm going to have to look at that one just to be sure that I'm up to speed on all of these things. Yes. Okay. And so I got this direct message via the Patreon system from listener Pete Catchbow. Hey, Pete. How you doing? Just thought I would read out your thanks to Greg. Big thanks to Greg for the MLK Day shout out to Connecticut, Simsbury, Connecticut, and Greg's mention of the of MLK's personal connection to the state. I thought that was a great idea. I loved throwing in that local color, and so did Pete. So I guess, are you in or from Simsbury originally, or you're there now. I don't know. I would, I'll check up on that and maybe you can let us know, but, appreciate that and good to hear from you. And, I wanted to pass that thanks on to Greg and, thereby fulfill my obligation, I think. But yeah, good programming note and, good feedback. 'Cause yeah, I think those kinds of stories make everybody happy. And that one did. Thought you should know about that, Greg, as opposed to passing on only the feedback of Greg won't let David talk. I know that's what he's here for. I don't want to do the first hour of the show. Okay. Now turning back to Trump's lineup of attorneys. Right. We got it correct. Now we got the name of the guy who withdrew just 2 days ago. And somehow I didn't notice that at all. Attorney Joe Tacopina withdraws from Trump's legal team. Tacopina was, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly or not, but it doesn't matter because he's gone. He was representing the former president in 2 New York cases. Again, thanks to ABC News, Aaron Katersky, Catherine Falders, reporting here. And I got to look back. When Greg was telling me he was rounding up other information, other reporting about the legal team lineup, I don't know if I got the links for those or not, but not quite as important if we don't read from them. But former President Donald Trump on Monday lost an experienced defense attorney from his legal roster. That's, again, Monday, like the week the trial began. That's usually a huge indication that something has happened behind the scenes, which is awful and traumatic and jeopardizes the professional standing of the lawyer leaving. But they're usually not permitted because of confidentiality issues to tell anyone exactly what it was that made them leave. But they are allowed to make a production of their leaving. And, you know, nothing can be splashier than leaving on Monday when the trial is supposed to start on Tuesday. Joe Tacopina told ABC News, I withdrew on all matters, which I guess is both cases that are in New York. I don't know what the other one is, but maybe this will explain. Tacopina accompanied Trump when the former president pleaded not guilty in New York last April to charges that he falsified business records stemming from his hush payment, there we are, to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. So I forget, the Manhattan DA's office is the one prosecuting that one. So he's, remember, in trouble. He's in a civil fraud case being prosecuted by the state attorney general in New York. That's taking place in New York City. He's facing charges about the hush money payment being prosecuted by the Manhattan DA in state court. In that, well, they're both in state court. The fraud case, civil fraud, and then this also, I guess, a civil case. Falsifying business records being brought by the Manhattan DA. And then, of course, there's the E. Jean Carroll case, likewise civil, but in federal court in New York. So, he's in 3 proceedings in Manhattan at the same time. That's good for him. He can shuttle around very easily and get to each of his court dates. And then, of course, the other courts proceeding elsewhere, Georgia, for instance. But okay, let's see. And Washington, D.C. as well with Jack Smith. Okay. So where were we with this one? Prosecutors with the Manhattan DA's office allege, of course, that Trump engaged in a scheme to boost his election chances during the 2016 race through a series of hush money payments made by others to help his campaign, and then repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal that criminal conduct. Trump denies all wrongdoing there, which means he did it. In a letter to Judge Juan Merchan, or Merchan, perhaps, the judge overseeing the case, Tacopina, wrote, I write respectfully to inform the court that my firm, Chad Siegel, and I hereby withdraw as counsel for defendant Donald J. Trump in this proceeding. So both of them, I guess. So the Stormy Daniels hush money case, he's out, and the E. Jean Carroll case. Wow. And the startling similarities in some cases between the two of them. Susan Nichelis, I guess, is Trump's lead counsel in the case. That would be are they referring to the Stormy Daniels case here? Attorney Todd Blanche also appeared in April's arraignment. Okay, so I mean, maybe that's not a civil case. I guess it isn't. Okay, you really need like a spreadsheet, literally, to keep track of all these cases he's involved in. You forget that he's even facing charges in some of these things. Tacopina also represented Trump in the civil defamation and battery case brought by E. Jean Carroll, which is the one we were focusing on, or how we started in this thing, in which Trump was found liable, not guilty, but liable. And it wasn't that there was no guilty in the offing, because this was simply a case of civil defamation, not the criminal charge of rape, and ordered to pay Carroll $5 million in damages. And I think the criminal charges of rape, we probably were well past the statute of limitations for bringing those charges, perhaps, but no such limitation. Or in fact, there was an extension, I think, of the window during which a plaintiff like Jean Carroll would be allowed to file those. And didn't the state legislature change the rules on the statute of limitations for the civil action as well? Anyway, so they ended up with attorney Alina Habba and her partner Michael Madeo representing Trump in Carroll's other lawsuit in that case. And there are two closely related but separate proceedings, which is scheduled to go to trial Tuesday. That was, of course, the other day in Manhattan Federal Court, and it did. It just went without the guy they thought would be representing Trump. Tacopina was one of the most accomplished trial lawyers on Trump's teams, with a long history of criminal case victories, though this wasn't a criminal case. His client list has included former baseball star Alex Rodriguez, in case that's important to you, Fox News shows Sean Hannity, and rapper ASAP Rocky. Okay. Does they say ASAP? Does it say ASAP? I have no idea. I don't know. Sorry. He declined further comment about his withdrawal as Trump's attorney, as probably confidentiality rules would require. But I guess that's how we ended up with Alina Habba. How interesting is that? Okay, and I guess she just doesn't watch any courtroom dramas and doesn't know about marking your exhibits and how you enter things into evidence. I'm sure probably not that brushed up on the rules of what to do if she offers something into evidence and the opposing counsel actually object to it. Like, well, what are the arguments I can make in order to get something like this admitted? I don't know. I didn't even know you had to mark the things, I guess. So that's not going to go well for Trump, which is fine, because I guess the next thing to read is Marcy Wheeler's theory of what it is that he's doing there. And it's not that he's necessarily trying to win the case, nor is it that he's trying to make any particular point. I think what she's getting at here is that that's going to be a campaign platform for him, for one thing, and for another thing, that he's on a campaign, not his election campaign, but also conducting a campaign to essentially undermine the rule of law, because if there is a rule of law, well, then he wouldn't be on the ballot, for one thing, much less be elected president. So let me see the way she puts it here. As I said, she sets it up with the headline, Donald Trump has chosen to pay millions to trash the rule of law. He'll be fined. He'll have to pay those fines at some point. The court does, in fact, have power to, leverage mechanisms that will force money out of his hands, which is fantastic because that's the only way you're ever going to get it out of him. But he views it as a cost of doing business, I suppose, in the larger project of trashing the rule of law. So what's up here? Marcy begins by saying, I have a standing complaint that reporters serially fall into Donald Trump's trap of reporting on his courtroom tantrums rather than the evidence of his fraud and crime presented therein. But I'm going to do just that, because I believe reporters are, also making another mistake apparently, misunderstanding the way in which Donald Trump is approaching the second E. Jean Carroll trial and what it bodes for his attack on democracy ahead. so that it's not just a sensational happening to cover, but part and parcel of the continuing insurrection against the United States and its democracy, I suppose. It started with a series of requests to delay the trial so that Trump could attend the funeral of Melania's mother. But the funeral was a ruse. Even as he made the requests, Trump continued to obviously and publicly plan campaign events in New Hampshire for the period of the potential delay. After initial denials, Alina Habba renewed the request to the famously irascible Judge Lewis Kaplan. That drew a predictable rebuke, in response to which Habba mouthed off to the judge, captured here in this exchange, or as reported by, let's see what the link is, CNN. Earlier Wednesday, Kaplan told Habba to sit down after she tried yet again to get Kaplan to postpone the trial on Thursday so Trump could attend his mother-in-law's funeral. I will hear no further argument on it. None. Do you understand that word? None. Please sit down, Kaplan said. And Habba's mouthing off response, well, I can see why she feels this way, but you're not supposed to do it if you want to win the case, but maybe she doesn't care. That's Marcy's point. I don't like to be spoken to that way, Habba responded. And while certainly true, that's actually part of the job description as an attorney. As a trial attorney, you get used to taking abuses from judges. It's not nice. It shouldn't necessarily work that way, but it kind of does. And if you mouth off, you put your client at a disadvantage, so you try not to do that. Habba had to have known this would go over poorly, Marcy continues. She attended Trump's first rape trial. Plus, even a parking garage lawyer from New Jersey would know of Kaplan's strict decorum in his court, or certainly someone would have told you on their way in. You know what you got to do to prepare for a trial before Judge Kaplan? I know. I'll tell you all about it. Habba invited follow-on rebukes by failing other basic rules of trial decorum. Over the course of the day, Trump's attorneys asked Kaplan first to recuse. I mean, really, this is just throwing, again, the ketchup at the wall, right? You're on trial and you're going to lose. What do you do? Well, Your Honor, I move that you recuse yourself from this trial. Well, that's denied. So let's get started. All right, well, then I ask for a mistrial. That's what actually came next. Well, why? On what basis? Badness on your part? Well, denied. And then, just as they did this the same way with Judge Engeron as well in Trump's civil fraud trial, so it was a well-known tactic. But again, just say whatever. I move for a bad court thingy, like what's his Lionel Hutz on the Simpsons. Just try anything. You should recuse yourself. No, it's a mistrial. It's not a mistrial. It's another thing. Let's delay the trial because you've already announced on social media that you're going to a campaign rally. You're not going to this funeral, and I'm just not going to accept that as a response. But, Your Honor, I strenuously ask that you do. Well, we're not going to. Sit down. But I double secret strenuously, and at some point that's going to earn you a rebuke. No, I'm not going to hear anything more about it. I have told you no. The answer is no. Sit. Well, I don't like to be spoken to that way. Well, rough day for you then. Sorry. Let's see. Where were we? Carroll took the stand, and throughout, Trump audibly fumed, leading Carroll's lawyer to ask Judge Kaplan to quiet him. That led, again, predictably, to a clash between him and Kaplan. That's another note we'll have to add to this. But as I was saying right at the top of the show, again, this is a story, this is a trial about you forcing yourself on Jean Carroll. And in the middle of it, you won't stop forcing yourself on the jury. They don't want to hear from you, and they're not even allowed to hear from you at this stage of the game, but you're forcing your way into their ears anyway, despite the fact that they're just trying to do their jobs and, judge this case. But you're forcing your way in on them and pushing into their personal space with your loud muttering. But then the confrontation between him and the judge, Mr. Trump has the right to be present here. That right can be forfeited, the judge says, and it can be forfeited if he's disruptive, which is what has been reported to me. the judge said, his muttering loud enough for the jury to hear it. Kaplan then spoke directly to Trump, who was seated at the defense table. Mr. Trump, I hope I don't have to consider excluding you from the trial, he said. I understand you are probably very eager for me to do that. You know, all the warnings got through to him. At that point, Trump then throws up his hand saying, I would love it. I would love it. And that's when you start to worry about, well, you know, like I said, they give all these judges little hammers. You wonder whether he wants to rap them over the knuckles or straighten the head with when things like that happen. But no, he says, I know you would. I know you would. You just can't control yourself in these circumstances, apparently, which, again, for a normal person is the end of it. But Trump shot back, well, you can't either. I mean, I'm rubber and you're glue. This is literally what he's doing. You can't control yourself in the court. Well, neither can you. Well, one, I can, and I am. And two, not really the smartest thing to say to the guy who's presiding over your trial, but he's looking to be punished so that he can whine to his base about how unfair everything is. Again, all this was predictable, and commentators are probably correct in guessing that they'll lead the jury to boost the award. But two things about this reality theater make me, Marcy, convinced it is also entirely planned. That's not hard to reach as a conclusion. First, something led Joe Tacopina to drop off the team the day before trial. Highly unusual. In the past, other lawyers have dropped when they had a conflict with Boris Epstein, who continues to run the reality TV show that substitutes for Trump's legal defenses. And Epstein even attempted to speak up before Judge Kaplan told him, as he told Haba repeatedly, to take a seat. The other indication that this has all been carefully scripted are Trump's posts, rolling out even as he sits in the courtroom without his phone, defaming Carroll again over and over, or bitching about Kaplan. Either Trump drafted those posts in advance or granted a staffer license to defame and attack on his behalf. This one, included here and embedded, attacking Judge Kaplan, for example, suggests that his male lawyer asked him not to attend his last rape trial, but now he is attending to witness what Trump falsely claims is bias and unfairness. And I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to read through the rant necessarily, but it is embedded here for your viewing pleasure, all crossed out with red ink and everything. Trump is attending this trial, which will almost certainly result in a much larger award for Carroll than she would get otherwise, and he's attending in order to delegitimize it. And Trump has decided it is worth the millions that he'll be penalized to do that. Given that he's a notorious cheapskate who stiffs his lawyers, that ought to give commentators pause. Does he simply plan to not pay, setting up a further confrontation and ultimately a contempt fight? What then? A call to violence? It's a good question, right? I mean, it's the right question. So, clearly he's going to lose, and there'll be a judgment against him for millions and millions of dollars. And it is ordinarily not in question. Well, what if he doesn't pay? I mean, except for that it's Donald Trump, so it's a good question. What if he doesn't pay? But what if any defendant who's found liable and ordered to pay $10 million doesn't pay? There are mechanisms, usually, to try to force that money out of them. And usually your objections to the use of those mechanisms don't go very far, mostly because it doesn't make any sense for somebody to pay extra millions of dollars to their lawyers to fight a losing cause. You've had a judgment entered against you. There's really not much you can do to stop them if you have wages, garnishing the wages. If you have accounts in banks that can be frozen, they'll be frozen, assets seized, what have you. There's lots of avenues to execute this judgment against Trump or someone like him, but often or rarely is somebody going to find it to be in their interest to spend more money to simply fight all of those open and shut cases. When there's a judgment of the court and there's a legal mechanism that's available to them to recover the judgment, they'll take it and you can protest all you want, throw all the ketchup you want, you'll lose. But if somebody is interested in spending the money to pay lawyers that will entitle them to a day in court to say, no, when the judge simply will say yes at the end of the day, I guess that changes the equation. All right, so we'll continue with Marcy's article pointing all of this out after the break. Let's get some taste of it, though, as we run up to our third break. Trump has, of course, decided that it's worth the millions to do that, and then leaving the open question. Suppose he simply just says, well, all right, you're going to freeze my accounts? Well, I'm going to abscond to Switzerland with gold bars, or what have you. What does come next? Is it a call to violence? And what happens if he makes that call? All right. Well, let's see. I guess we'll just continue with that answer to that question, very dangerous and open question, after this short break. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Our last segment, let's continue with reading Marcy Wheeler's latest, or well, one of the latest posts up at Empty Wheel, describing what she thinks Trump gets out of these spectacular losses. And they are, I guess, if you are looking to make a mockery of the judicial system, I mean, you may or may not succeed, at least inside the courtroom, in making a mockery. It seems like while you're in the courtroom, they'll be making a mockery of you. But afterwards, is it possible to turn the whole thing on its head by simply refusing to comply and, I don't know, sending armed mobs out, for instance, to try to, change the minds of judges who think they ought to be enforcing the judgments entered in their courtrooms? Okay, so where were we? Right. Given that Trump is a notorious cheapskate who stiffs his lawyers, it ought to give commentators pause. In other words, somebody who is famously cheap like that and simply won't pay up, why do something that will rack up legally enforceable fines against yourself? And the answer might very well be, the bigger the fine against me, the splashier the headlines when I say, screw you, come and take it. This ploy comes at a key time, she continues, after the Iowa caucus, with its anemic turnout signaling Trump's expected victory, may shrink the GOP so badly it will lose races up and down the ballot. Political journalism instead turned to treating the results themselves as news. The Washington Post paid almost 20 journalists to write 10 stories a day the day after the caucus. Political journalists want to pretend everything is normal. Yet Trump has not been running a campaign. He has been running an effort to consolidate the party to him, increasingly committed to his attack on the rule of law. I mean, you would have thought that the 10 journalists in Iowa would have noticed, for instance, hey, that guy is not really campaigning in Iowa. Certainly not in the traditional ways in which, go to all 99 counties and doing retail politics. And there may be many reasons for that. But why are we not discussing that? And why are we not discussing how unusual this victory is? If we're going to treat it like a normal victory, why not look at the strategy behind that victory and realize, unusual. He's rarely here, and all he does is large rallies, and then he disappears. And when he disappears, it's because he has to be in court elsewhere. Perhaps we should have noted that along the way. So, within days, hopefully, the D.C. Circuit will rule that he is not immune, and therefore Joe Biden can't assassinate him with impunity, which is probably a good outcome, which will finally set up a test of the Supreme Court's willingness to rule against him criminally. His other court filings are similarly descending into louder and louder wails. At the same time, even before joining Mike Roman's challenge to Fani Willis in Georgia, he has started working Fani Willis herself, into court filings in other cases, as in this motion to compel in the Florida case. And it is quoted here from directly from courtroom filings or courthouse filings in that case. A January 12th, 2024 congressional inquiry and other sources indicate that such materials exist. What materials? Well, we'll get into it. Specifically, Congress sent a letter to attorney consultant and special assistant district attorney Nathan Wade regarding documents suggesting that Wade helped coordinate with the Biden administration in 2022. One of Wade's invoices indicates that he devoted 8 hours to a conference with White House counsel on May 23rd, 2022. And I guess if my recollection is correct, Nathan Wade is, as they point out here, attorney consultant, special assistant district attorney in the Georgia case where Trump and Roman and others are alleging that Fani Willis had some inappropriate personal relationship, or, well, the relationship might have been appropriate enough with Nathan Wade, but then naming him, as they claim, attorney consultant and special assistant district attorney, they claim is a conflict and that he's ineligible to pursue the case, or that Fani Willis ought to be removed from the case as well for ignoring the relationship, if it in fact did exist, and naming him to this position. So I guess that's it. A January 12th congressional inquiry, probably in the House, run by Republicans, aimed at looking into that situation, is what he's leaning on here, and that leaning on them for the claim that materials exist, wherever they may be, that prove the point that he's trying to make about Nathan Wade. Okay, got it. One of Wade's invoices indicates that he devoted 8 hours to a conference with White House counsel on May 23rd, 2022. The meeting occurred within weeks of the New York Times reporting on President Biden's leaked statement that President Trump should be prosecuted. And around the same time that Jonathan Su, S-U, from the White House counsel's office was working with NARA, N-A-R-A, the records archives, right, to manipulate the Presidential Records Act, in an effort to disclose records to the FBI and the January 6th committee. Okay, so he's got a very large, vast conspiracy theory about what's going on here. Why is that important? Willis will not formally respond until early February after responding to Nathan Wade's divorce, leaving a vacuum where any explanation should be. And while I think this report, linked herein, gets ahead of the verified facts, it's a good warning of where the challenge to Willis may go. We might want to look at that at some point. Until that's resolved, Trump will try to taint every single legal case against him with a tie to Willis. And it might be the case that he just pleads that everywhere. He might even do it in New York. This is how persecuted I really am. Everywhere they're making up cases against me in an illegal fashion to make me look worse, even in this case. Could be. I mean, it's not usually going to work and not going to stick, but like we said, he's throwing every bit of ketchup he can find. Plus, Marcy continues, it's not just Trump whose legal woes are coming to a head. Peter Navarro is set to be sentenced on January 25th. And there have been sealed filings in DOJ's civil suit to recover encrypted communications from him, I guess Navarro, that should have been provided under the Presidential Records Act. Steve Bannon's New York trial is set for May, another issue. Roger Stone is even back under investigation, even beyond the January 6th investigation, for his reported discussions of assassinating Jerry Nadler or Eric Swalwell. I think we made mention of that, but we didn't actually read the article on the air. I mean, what more do you really need to know about that? Trump's entire fascist cohort would, in a normal world, be facing up to the possibility of consequences for their acts. But that's not how this crowd rolls. They would rather bring down the rule of law in the United States than face consequences themselves. Indeed, it's such a central part of their plan that Trump's actually willing to spend money or invite contempt, anyway, followed by whatever incitement with which he responds. Remember again here, contempt of court underlies a lot of all of the power that the court has to enforce judgments that are entered against you. You are found liable for $10 million. There is a place where we might actually find that $10 million. We'll use our leverage to get it out of your hands. And if you fight us at some point, we can say, all right, you're actually in contempt of court. There's an order for you to turn this $10 million over. If you don't turn it over by midnight tomorrow, you'll be found in contempt of court and you can be imprisoned. At which point Trump turns and says, they're putting me in jail illegally because I win so much. You got to riot. You got to shoot people. Of course, wink, wink. He'll never say it that way. And, well, if violence ensues, what do you do? He's already, in jail for contempt of court. That you could, of course, say, well, this incitement to violence is another conspiracy case against you that will take 2 to 6 years to develop. And we'll see you in court when you're 87 for that one. But in the meantime, people are getting shot. What are we going to actually do about that? All right. She goes on to say, it is a category error to view Trump's trial tantrums within the rubric of normal legal consequences, even in Kaplan's entirely predictable courtroom. Oh no, it's going to cost him money in fines. Yes, it will. They are, instead, part of a concerted effort to take down the rule of law. For years, Trump has been training his cult to loathe the rule of law, and his latest theater is all part of that process. Even as Trump is ensuring he will be the GOP's only possible choice in November, he is also guaranteeing that the entire party will need his attack on the rule of law in order to succeed. Trump's fascist mouthpiece, Stephen Miller, has already started a campaign claiming that Joe Biden is causing the chaos that Trump is about to unleash. It's all part of the plan. Well, we'll see and see whether it develops along those lines. But it's a good warning, certainly, for those even just trying to figure out the end game of these cases. He's getting fined left and right. He's going to lose so much. He'll be held liable. The award to Jean Carroll will be that much larger. He might even be, banned from the courtroom so that he can't scream out or whisper to the jury or whatever is going on in the various cases. Yes, but he might not comply with those. He didn't comply with Judge Engeron's warnings that you have to acknowledge the limitations of what you can and can't say in a closing argument. To hell with that. But he didn't even get held in contempt for that one. He's daring them to do it. And, interesting. I mean, it's a parallel in a way to the 14th Amendment arguments that we've been having. Well, yes, it is plain on its face that he ought to be disqualified as an insurrectionist. But if we do that, we're inviting violence. Well, yeah. I mean, that's too bad, but we don't want that. But ultimately, that kind of is what underlies all the rules here, right? The threat that if you don't obey the rules, the government will use its monopoly on the right, quote unquote, rightful use of violence to make you comply. But if they can scare you out of doing that by saying, we'll bring our own violence, well, then you have to start to wonder who's in charge here. What is the government? Which one of you is the real government of the United States? You with your tantrums and militias, or these guys over here with their police, army, and constitution? And, by the way, footnote, maybe we don't really enjoy the way the police interpret the Constitution after all. And what if they're interpreting it your way and being a militia? I don't know. Well, that's a deeper question than I meant to dive into. But I guess that gives us an opportunity to head back to yesterday's reading, which we didn't finish, in politicalresearch.org. Remember this article about county capture? For background, for those of you who might not have listened to the show, one, go back and do it. Two, I guess a quick recap here. They were using the examples from Virginia, right here in Virginia, that 4 counties had been persuaded, their county boards of supervisors had been persuaded to consider, and in some cases adopt, resolutions formally recognizing some local militia organization in some way. And it's not entirely clear what, if anything, it entitles them to, but I guess by way of recap, I should go back up here and figure out which county it is. It is the Bedford County. The Bedford County Militia Incorporated is how they identify themselves, and they have succeeded through their relationship with members, presumably far right-wing members of the Bedford County Board of Supervisors, to approve a resolution formally recognizing the militia in some way. I don't know which way. I haven't seen the language of it, and it may or may not actually go so far as to entitle them to do anything in particular. But I think it's just laying the groundwork for some essentially like sovereign citizen level logic here. In other words, relying on a provision of the Virginia state constitution and archaic, in some cases pre-federal constitution, historical interpretation of law about the role of a county militia, which in the modern sense is none. There isn't one, and there shouldn't be, and we have plenty of military and paramilitary power in place, ostensibly with some system of accountability in it, but you could argue about how well it's doing and all of that. But back in the day, like to basically point back to colonial times and early constitutional times, the county militia is a legitimate organization that can be mustered in times of national necessity or to repel invasion. Or in those days, that could be anything from the French have invaded again, the local Indian population is in need of decimation again, or they have actually attacked, or whatever the motivation may be. Back in the day when there was yet no standing police force, no standing armed forces, and that the local farmers were supposed to turn out in support of, super patriotic things like defeating the British. 200 years removed from that, they think, if it was good enough for the founders, we should be able to organize a militia now. And so they have. And people are worried about that because it's an unaccountable paramilitary organization. But what if the county board of supervisors can be convinced to recognize it as the militia that the Virginia Constitution was talking about those many years ago, or that even the federal colonial and early constitutional records were speaking of? Then they think, again, through their sovereign citizen-like logic, that this would entitle them to legal status, which you may remember was also part of the motivation of the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, and others on January 6th. We think we'll be given the legal go-ahead to start rampaging against our enemies under the Insurrection Act, that will be deputized in some way to carry out our violence as legitimate state violence. And remember, just a few minutes ago when we were talking about the danger of Trump simply defying all rule of law, and Marcy was saying, what if there's a threat of violence in return? And what if it's perpetrated by people who are under the mistaken, or maybe very real, belief that they have been deputized to do so that there is no, state monopoly on the use of force any longer. We claim equal right to use force, equal legal right to use force in opposition to the government's monopoly on force. I mean, it may be totally baseless and without merit, but if they believe it and start shooting, I don't know if anybody cares all that much. You're just as dead, shot down by bullets delivered under false color of law as you are any other bullets as well. So back to that being the background, getting local right-wing politicians to do something ostensibly, quote unquote, harmless. We'll recognize I'm merely recognizing the existence of this militia, which they have a right to exist. Maybe, sort of, or maybe they don't. Well, what happens if they're also working in concert with one of these constitutional sheriffs who thinks that they can ignore federal law if, in their opinion, it's unconstitutional? And a local sheriff doesn't make much difference if he's got 6 deputies in a rural county, but what if he's got a militia behind him that thinks it's entitled to certain constitutional rights because it's been, quote unquote, recognized by a couple of lunatics on the county board of supervisors? They then introduced the concept of democratic erosion, right? Backsliding, essentially. Places that have usually pointing to examples from abroad, decolonized areas of the world establishing for the first time their own democracy and not having that tradition to lean on for very long, and backsliding into authoritarianism, either through the dictator's insistence that he's preserving democracy, rightly or wrongly, or some other set of circumstances. All right. So now we can jump back into where we left off yesterday, which was noting the very weird twist for anti-government militias to suddenly become pro-government militias when Trump is in control, right? By 2017, they noted here, U.S. militias started to behave less like guerrillas, anti-government guerrillas, and more like pro-state paramilitaries. They thought there was some legality and legitimacy in the offing for them. Despite continued talk of the New World Order and a deep state, many militias made peace with the federal government federal power in Trump's hands, even welcoming federal policing against their common enemies. They cite here early days stuff, 2017, Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes offering to coordinate security with the Department of Homeland Security in advance of an alt-right free speech rally that was expected to attract anti-fascist counter-protesters. The Oath Keepers continued to support Trump in the 2020 election season, serving as security guards at his rallies and on security details for high flyers in his orbit like Roger Stone and Ali Alexander, right? We all remember all of that. Then, of course, come January 6th, they really thought they were going to be deputized to execute the law against Trump's enemies. There's also the Proud Boys, of course, right? And the stand back and stand by thing that was so attractive to them. Although many of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who participated in the failed January 6th insurrection were ultimately found guilty of seditious conspiracy or other felonies, the far right endures. And though some adherents will fall away, those who remain are likely to become more extreme. They may go underground for a time, refocusing their efforts on local action. And that's what this is about. While many contemporary militias cut their teeth on defending local sovereignty, in quotes, from a presumably tyrannical federal government, their current efforts to seek formal recognition from county boards of supervisors and establish relationships with county sheriffs suggests they now hope to gain direct access to local levers of power. Indeed, the Bedford County Militia Incorporated, their webpage prominently highlights their connections with local law enforcement in matters of public safety and emergency services. Wonder why and in what sense, and perhaps we should take a look at that one. Given militias' support for Trump and potential militant convergence across the far right, Virginia's militias could intimidate Democratic voters, harass election workers, and muster, that is, summon their troops to guarantee Trump's return to power if the 2024 election's final vote tally doesn't go his way. And remember yesterday, Greg was telling us about the Iowa voters who believed that that would happen on the federal level, that the Army would come out to reverse the results of the election if Trump didn't win. Maybe, maybe not, but what if there was a makeshift alternative army? And what if, though they really, in reality, everyone thought that you would get more people shot and that an attack on the Capitol from an armed mob would actually be repelled by armed police and or the National Guard. It wasn't, but everyone believed that was the case, and everyone has always sort of held, well, what is the power of local militias, even with their powerful semi-automatic rifles, against the power of the actual United States armed forces? Well, presuming that they stay loyal and fight against them, there would appear to be no match on paper. But on the other hand, given where we are, say, in our debates over the 14th Amendment or later debates over enforcing the rules of court against Donald Trump, where we say, well, we fear the possibility of violence. I mean, is that enough to undo the whole thing? Well, yes, they could be steamrollered by the United States Armed Forces, but we're concerned about the optics, as one famous or infamous general said, or we're just don't think that that's going, we're afraid about the backlash that's going to come from this. Well, you're an army. You're supposed to destroy them. Go do it. Yeah, well, we have political considerations. Now back to the situation in Virginia for a little bit more on that. Bedford, Campbell, Franklin, and Halifax counties are in central and south side Virginia. Demographically, they're older, more rural, and less wealthy than the state as a whole. Except for Halifax, they're also whiter. In 2020, all 4 counties debated resolutions formally recognizing militias operating within their boundaries. The resolutions had varying success. In Franklin County, the local militia lobbied the Board of Supervisors for recognition in 2019, but the board didn't bring a resolution to the floor for more than 2 years, instead letting residents debate the issue during public comment sessions. In February of 2022, Franklin supervisors finally passed a more general resolution commending and lauding citizens for their spirit of volunteerism without mentioning the militia by name, sort of sidling up to it. Although militia members and supporters made the case for recognition by describing themselves as volunteers, they were angry the resolution didn't name them specifically. One member complained to the press that several supervisors had offered their support for the group in private. In Halifax, a supervisor introduced the resolution at its September 2020 board meeting, but the board tabled it and voted to remove it from consideration that November. Campbell and Bedford passed their resolutions in March and May of 2020, respectively. Now, the 2019 Virginia General Assembly election explains the timing of these resolutions. The results, which put Democrats in charge of both houses for the first time in 25 years, sent shockwaves through the state's Republican establishment. When Bedford's Board of Supervisors met to discuss their resolution in April of 2020, for example, Republican Supervisor Tommy Scott said the resolution was necessary because, quote, Richmond is trying to take away our Second Amendment rights, that old hobby horse. Although nothing we found in our 4 counties meetings minutes indicates formal external coordination behind the resolutions, the timing and sequence of their introduction suggests militias have been informally working, or at least harmonizing their efforts, with the Virginia Citizens Defense League, the VCDL, a gun rights group that the Southern Poverty Law Center describes as to the right of the NRA. Indeed, the militia resolutions followed closely on the heels of 2 efforts pushed by the VCDL shortly after the 2019 election. In a 2.5-month period just after the 2019 election, for example, a wave of local governments, including 91 of Virginia's 133 counties and 16 of its cities, passed Second Amendment sanctuary resolutions. Do you remember these in response to supposedly the immigration sanctuary resolutions? Bedford, Campbell, Franklin, and Halifax counties were among them. According to local news interviews with the VCDL's president, the group coordinated with gun owners across the state to get sanctuary resolutions introduced and passed. The speed of passing these resolutions suggests the VCDL also had inside help in many counties. Time for us to wrap up for the day. According to Bedford board minutes from a December 2019 meeting that drew nearly 1,000 residents, the sheriff reported the resolution when it was brought to the floor. Why the sheriff? A local resident who was there and who requested anonymity to avoid reprisal recalled that the sheriff, quote, indicated that he will let the militia do what they have to do, whatever that might be. He wouldn't take orders from the governor to curtail them. What are we supposed to make of this? The VCDL also organized, remember this one, a gun rally planned to coincide with the General Assembly's annual Lobby Day, a long-standing January event described by the Washington Post as a day devoted to amateur arm twisting. You go and visit your state representatives and, give them a piece of your mind. Although the VCDL insisted the gun rally was not a protest, the group announced militias would provide, quote, security. Another far-right group soon latched on to the Lobby Day gun rally. White nationalists quickly described the event on social media as the Boogaloo. Oh no. Of course, far-right slang for civil war. In the weeks leading up to the event, far-right chatter was so intense that then Governor Ralph Northam declared a state of emergency. Do you even remember that this happened? I only barely remember that this happened. More about this tomorrow. We really got to get through this article. But for now, Justice Putnam takes you forward for the rest of the day.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Pretty ominous stuff, really, but let's change focus and let Justice Putnam take you through the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy next right here on Netroots Radio. Let's see what's up top of the agenda today. Trump concocts his dumbest defense yet in the Mar-a-Lago document case, and he's begging his defense team judge to help him out. More of these shenanigans. Let's find out more next.